Calaroga Shark Media.
It's me again. Hello, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news bonus edition. Earlier today, the normal Tuesday episode went out. Later today, I will have a Jimmy Kimmel bonus episode for you as Jimmy Kimmel is returning to Jimmy Kimmel Live tonight. So that should be exciting. Give us all something to talk about. This episode, my guest is Mark Makloff. You know Mark. He used to host the Carson podcast. He currently hosts the Inside Late Night podcast. Boy, I hope they can find something to talk about. And as I discovered on the fly as we recorded this interview, that's back today for a new season. Totally accidental. I reached out to the guy because he was on my radar anyway because of the book, and then there was this whole Jimmy Kimmel thing, so that worked out for both of us. He also has that new book. It is called Love, Johnny Carson. In this conversation with Mark Makloff, author of Love, Johnny Carson, host of the Carson podcast, host of Inside Late Night, we talk about Johnny Carson, but also words like Leno, Letterman, Fallon, Colbert, and oh yes, Kimmel gets said. So here's my conversation with Mark Makloff, and Johnny Mac started with a long-winded question. I definitely want to talk to you about Carson a lot up front. I'm sure we'll get to the other news of the week. I'm struggling here. If we could do like some sort of Marvel movie time travel and somehow insert Johnny Carson into this current era of Kumbaya, we all get along. I don't mind that you have another talk show at 11:30 on the other network, and I'm not sure I can even get there. But if I can, I'm struggling to imagine Johnny doing, say, what Stephen Colbert has done or what David Letterman has done. I was trying to channel my inner Johnny this morning, and with all apologies, the best I could come up with would be a joke, something like, on the way over here, I saw Jimmy Kimmel working at the Wendy's, and then looking left, right, did that joke land? I can't picture him doing a 10-minute diatribe about the government or the FCC as a Carson expert. What do you think Johnny Carson would somehow do in 2025?
I think he would probably just be doing the same show that he did for 30 years. But I mean, it did upset presidential administrations. Like Nancy Reagan called the show twice and was upset. Gerald Ford said it was a love-hate relationship. Jimmy Carter's mom, Lillian, called Carson an ASS. I don't know if you can swear on this, but until she met him and went on the show, and then she thought he was delightful. So, him, like Jay Leno, like Conan, they were always hammering whoever was in office. It was just, they weren't, you never knew where Johnny was voting. I mean, he would hammer. When he found out that the Reagans were upset with his jokes, he said, that's surprising. I thought we were tougher on Carter or Jimmy Carter. And, but I think it was, since Will Rogers, it's just you had people like this that just did this, but it was definitely very different for somebody to take like Colbert and Kimmel to take stances. But it's different, people forget. I think that first year when Colbert was on, he wasn't taking a stance. He was getting clobbered in the ratings. He was number 3. He was doing the show he wanted to do, and Trump was on the show with him, and I thought he was easy on him, and Stevens acknowledged that. But I think Carson would just be doing the same show. I mean, his rule up until he retired in Burbank was no politicians in office, and he broke it twice. Only once for Reagan on the anniversary show in 72 because they were out of videotape because NBC found out had erased the first 10 years and they needed big stars. And Reagan did 5 minutes. And then once with Clinton only because he did saxophone and he was not famous. They booked him as a civilian, which was for the non-famous people in 88, in 1988 when he got in trouble with the DNC. Speaking for 33 minutes when he was supposed to do 15, and he was getting just trounced in Carson's monologue. And then those are the only 2 times. So it was just a different show, and I just think times change. And and I think Johnny would definitely, just get a huge kind of just be baffled by the whole thing today.
I did see over the weekend some Trump jokes circulating, one with a joke about Jennifer Flowers being the backup mistress. So there were a couple things like that, but they were later in Johnny's tenure. But yeah, I can't imagine him doing 10 minutes about the way Colbert is doing it, is the way I'll say it. I think too with Johnny, and Letterman got into this as well, there's a type of needling joke that's just fun among friends. Like a Mark Makloff joke punchline might be, he's probably watching a Carson rerun. Like it's a harmless joke, whether it's true or not, as opposed to, digging in about, why so-and-so is a horrible person. I think you're right that it's just a different time.
Dave took a different approach at the later years. I think after he said Jon Stewart on cable was going after politicians and taking kind of a stance, that Letterman just, he emulated, he wanted to know what did Johnny do at this point in his career and trying to emulate him. But the one thing that he didn't was, he started to get a little bit with his political views. And I think that probably gave room for the others to do it a little bit. I mean, I do find the Colbert's first season very interesting where he didn't try to do that. And again, him and Kimmel have 200 people, staff and crew that depend on him. And I get why Colbert did what he did, just because he was number one. When you're number one and it's working, you just keep doing what is working. But you definitely, like, Carson was very much like, you're going to alienate 50%. Like I talk about it, like David Steinberg was doing a Nixon thing and Carson, routine in Nixon. It was getting some laughs, but at the break, Carson just told Steinberg, it's like, you're losing half your audience. It doesn't bother me, but they're not with you yet. And, that definitely, like, it's definitely not where Carson would go to taking a stance, but it definitely, he hammered. I mean, he, especially in New York, he had a lot of politicians on. He had people, like atheists, like Madeline Murray O'Hare, the head of the NRA, the head of the Church of Satan, believe it or not, Jim Garrison from the JFK movie, who is a prosecutor with the first real JFK kind of conspiracy. So they definitely did the politics the first 10 years over there. But again, you just had no idea where his politics lie. He did do something for Lyndon Johnson in his inaugural, which he definitely wish he didn't, looking back, but it was like non-political. It was like so many stars were there. And basically the attitude was like, it's for the new president. You want to support them. But he really tried to stay out of politics. Sinatra corralled him in one of the Reagan inaugurals because he was Frank Sinatra, and Johnny kind of owed him, which I talk about in the book. So he did, he entertained one of the Reagan inaugurals because Sinatra was producing, but he didn't want to do it.
I have so many threads I could pull on, including the 50% stuff, but I want to save the Jay Leno conversation for later. Let's talk about your book.
Sure.
I'd like to hear you say the title, because I can't tell if it's like I got a love note from Johnny, love Johnny Carson, or it's love Johnny Carson. So how do you pronounce the book?
The book is called Love Johnny Carson. And the reason it's called Love Johnny Carson is because I talked to over 400 people, and overwhelmingly, they would tell me either when we were recording or not recording, or in email form, that I love Johnny Carson. They would say, I love Johnny Carson. And I was like, I didn't expect that to happen. I basically, I'd read some of the books, and I had heard what people like Joan Rivers and just a few people, like 2 or 3 people that were the loudest megaphones over the years that would repeat stuff about him. And there's only a handful of people, if that really had bad stuff to say, but it definitely seemed like that those were the loudest voices. So I was very, I was conflicted going into the podcast because I just didn't want to put negative stuff out there. I just didn't want, I wanted to tell the truth, whatever the truth was, but I thought it would maybe be 7 episodes because it would go too negative. And I was shocked when I talked to his friends and I talked to people that worked there, and it was like, he's unrecognizable. I really believe in this book, talking to the 400 people. I mean, this is the conclusion I made. And I think if people listen to the Carson podcast, that overwhelmingly the people loved him, and the stuff how he acted with his friends, universally, they would say he was the same Johnny on the show as he was with them. But Carson had to feel comfortable with the person. But they would say he was nearly the same Johnny. His second wife said the same thing. Yeah, he was a bad drinker. He would acknowledge it on the show, not only with Mike Wallace in 60 Minutes in 1979. He would talk about the drinking. He struggled with the drinking. He became a different person, which I go into. He would admit he had huge flaws, far from perfect, extremely sensitive individual. And that goes with my book, with him banning some guests that I go into. He was just, for somebody that was in the public eye and that famous, it really, he would get his feelings hurt all the time. He was one of those people that would say the critics, he never believed when guests would come on and be like, the critics don't hurt me, I have that thick skin. And it's like, no, I'm always hurt. He would read all the press. He read all those books, negative books about him. He would read the press on him, but it would hurt. And he would talk about that. I mean, yeah, sensitive guy.
I listened to the Carson podcasts. I guess you could have gone out of your way to book some. If we dig deep enough, somebody hates me, hates you, hates Johnny Carson. You could have gotten on somebody, but it's what you said that everybody really liked him personally.
I did try to get Joan Rivers. I tried to get Wayne Newton. I tried to get only a handful of people that I knew. But if I knew Elaine Boozler, people that had problems, none of them would talk to me. Please continue.
Well,
Sorry,
I was going to name drop Joan Rivers. I worked with Joan in 2000, 2002, that range, when she had a radio show at WOR.
Delightful.
And you could tell the whole breakup bothered her, but she didn't have a bad word to say about Johnny Carson off the air, behind the scenes. Obviously things went sideways there and it bothered her, but she had nothing but reverence for Johnny Carson.
I think when she got a mic in front of her and a camera, the venom would spew. But I think when she was talking to people, a lot of it was just like, he was the best straight man. He knew how to set me up and made my career. I do go very in depth with that story. I met Joan a few times, and twice, and she was very nice. And I am hard pressed to find. I mean, the people I know ultimately loved her so much. People that worked with her, the people that knew her, and I write about this and I defend her, that the people that worked on the Tonight Show, there's a lot of people I talked to that loved when she was over there guest hosting, and I wanted to make note of that. But I do go in very specific about the versions of the people that were at the Tonight Show and what happened on there, and what some of Miss Rivers' friends and people that knew her thought. And it's such a night and day story what Joan Rivers would say to her. And always, I just couldn't believe, somebody really smart, somebody, I'm not going to mention names, but there's one comedian that recently was talking about the Joan Rivers thing, and just how they believe to this day it was so simplistic that Johnny just, Joan didn't tell him, so he never talked to her again. End of story. Johnny didn't have to air his dirty laundry and the specifics publicly. He didn't owe anybody that, and he didn't. I mean, somebody asked him one time because after the monologue, a lot of times he would take questions from the audience. Somebody asked him, what are your thoughts on Joan going to Fox? And he's like, I wish her the best. I mean, after he never mentioned her on air, after the show got canceled, he never mentioned her publicly that I'm aware of. I mean, he would say two journalists, I would have handled it differently, or I don't think she handled it well, but yeah, he wasn't going to get into a back and forth thing about it. But I go into a lot of depth, and there's a lot of revelations about what, according to the Carson staffers and according to some of Miss Rivers' friends, what happened.
Was the book blessed at all? Did you talk to the estate? The nephew, Jeff Sotzing, is the controller of the estate, I still believe. Did you kiss the ring, or you draw off on your own? It doesn't matter. That's a stupid question, John.
It's a good question. Jeff knows about it. I told Jeff. He hasn't read it yet, to my knowledge, but I really hope he likes it. I had somebody who was on my podcast been like, is it a pro Johnny or is it an anti Johnny book? And I'm like, I wrote that. I told them, I'm like, I wrote the truth. And he's like, uh-oh. And I'm like, the truth is, because I feel like I owed it to the listeners. Some people were urging me, you might not want to make him look bad. It might take away empathy from the audience in your book. And I'm just like, I just wanted to write the truth. But my conclusion, and I think people that read the book ultimately, is overwhelmingly positive. I mean, that is the people that I talked to. I mean, there was definitely, when he drank, he called himself, it was he said he'd be fine. And that one more drink, he compared himself to Attila the Hun. And I go into the drinking stuff. But overwhelmingly, it was stories I couldn't include all of them. I wish I could. I had do a director's cut of the book, but how much amazing stuff he did for people behind the scenes, and he didn't want any publicity. I mean, everyone knows about the foundation, which at the time was the largest foundation. It was 190 million that he left. That's still, the foundation gives away millions of dollars every year to all these different groups and charities and nonprofits, but he was doing the same stuff just to people, and it was just not the Johnny Carson that I expected at all. And I was shocked, and I felt like there should be a book out there that answers. I feel like there's people that made certain claims, and I felt like I wanted to put the truth, like Wayne Newton, for example, about what I believe happened. Doing a little bit more research than him waiting for Johnny to pass away until he could make a claim because I mean, it's easy to wait till somebody dies to make such a claim that he did on Larry King in 2006, 2007, or whatever it was. And I was like, I know what, I feel like I just need to like set the record straight according to what the research I have done. And I did a little bit of that here and there. I really wish he would have participated, but what can you do?
Before we even get to the Carson podcast, let's back up before that. To the eye test, you seem within vaguely my age range. So for me, I watched Johnny Carson at first because it was the thing on that I killed time waiting for Dave to show up at 12:30 and came to appreciate. So what is your Johnny Carson? You don't seem like you were watching episodes in 1971. So what's your journey? Why are you like the Carson guy?
I think when I was like really little, like 4 or 5, my dad was showing me stuff like, it's a mad world, murdered by death. So like, I knew who like all these people were. Like, I mean, I knew who Jonathan Winters, Peter Falk, Eileen Brennan, so many like Peter Sellers movies. I was watching Pink Panther, and he's in Murdered by Death, which isn't like the greatest movie, but it's like, okay, Truman Capote, I know who he is now. And I was like such a sponge in terms of like early entertainment. My dad would just tell me he got to go to Carson's show in '68 and would tell me who was on the show. And he showed me, sometimes they would do these primetime specials, the anniversary shows, which were those were the things that really I fell in love with the show, I feel like. But sometimes Fridays I could stay up and watch clips watch a little bit of the show. But the thing with Carson is you could show kids and the animal segments, him talking to kids, the sketches like are going to go over a lot of the kids' heads, but like there's enough within the sketches where they can work on different levels, kind of like some comedy does. But he was just so likable, and it was a party, and I got to someone like Dangerfield. I probably shouldn't have been watching his sets when I was a kid, but like I didn't get some of it, but he was just so funny, and I did get some of it. But it was just like this adult party with all these people in show business. And I just loved the comedians, especially. And when the animals were Jim Fowler or Joan Embry. But those anniversary shows were like the best. I mean, those were the clip shows, I think, were the thing that really did it for me. But I was just obsessed with entertainment in general. And I was just trying to, like a sponge with comedy, just anybody, just watch as much as I could. But he was so likable. I think that's why he succeeded 30 years without any real serious competition. Was the likability thing. And he was completely himself on air. I asked Larry King, and I talked to other people. I'm like, why do you think he was so successful? And it's like, it's obvious. It was so clear. He was himself. I mean, he definitely, was a shy person, but if he was in control and comfortable, he could be that person. But that was definitely part of him. But he was definitely like all of us, a complicated person.
So is it more than just, even in New York City, there were 7 channels, and what else you're going to watch at 11:30? Because, Dick Cavett is likable, but maybe doing a more loaded term here, smarter show. But then again, his guest is John Lennon. That seems pretty cool. I might watch that. So is there more to Johnny just then? Yeah, he had 11:30 back at a time when, what else are you watching?
At one point, it was him, David Frost, Merv Griffin, and Cavett. It was four of them going head to head. So, I mean, there definitely were less options, but I definitely think at the end of the day, I think these shows are always about likability. I think he knew his audience, and, he would read the letters that would come in. He would personally respond to people sometimes when they were upset with a joke. He would either call them or write them a letter. He definitely would study tapes like an athlete, like a coach watching clips of his team play, and he was just he would say, at least in the New York years, I find myself, that's all I think about is the show. And I mean, I think he would probably realize that's not the most healthy thing. On vacations, him calling up on off weeks, calling Fred DeCordova up with ideas for the show when he comes back. He would always say he didn't really watch the show that much sometimes, but he watched it most of the nights. It seemed like he would stay up and watch his show, and you could tell he watched the guest hosts too, because he would comment on them sometimes. And there would be a comedian that had never been on his show that did the guest hosting, and he'd be like, you know what, they did very well. Let's get them on with me. But yeah, I don't know if you can last 30 years like that. in terms of like the pressure cooker that is going on that show. I mean, Dick Cavett said something that I mentioned in the book in a Time magazine interview. It's like going to 200 cocktail parties in a row and having to be the life at the party and the amount of energy. I mean, the guy was doing an hour and 45 minutes in New York the first couple years. I mean, it was unbelievable. Now they do an hour. They do maybe 180 shows at the most, where Carson of television a year, where Carson was doing his first couple of years, like over 400 hours the first couple of years. And then it went down to 90 minutes, but it was still an exhausting. I mean, Shanlane did an interview in I think 2012, and it's like, no one knows how exhausting it is. One of his competitors, Carson's competitor, said it's more grueling than shoveling snow for 8 hours. Just going out there. People, I don't think, realize how, for the most part, unless you're a cyborg robot like Jay Leno, for the most part, how exhausting and all-consuming those shows are.
I teach on Monday nights, and my wife is now knows this. You know, I lecture for 2 hours and change, and just the act of standing and talking, you know, it's not construction work out in the sun, but just even that is exhausting. Never mind if you're hosting the Tonight Show or one of these shows, you've got to be on. You really can't have a bad night. Plus the prep, you know, you can't just show up and be like, all right, who am I talking to? Burt Reynolds? All right, I'll wing it. You know, that's not the gig. It's not just, you work an hour a day. It must be nice.
Yeah, there's a misconception about, because Letterman would be at his studio all day, like most of the people. And Johnny didn't get there until maybe 2 hours before. If they were rehearsing a sketch, maybe a little earlier. But from the time he woke up, he did take a tennis break. It was about the show, and he was so hands-on from the time. The reason he wasn't there all day at the studio is because, rightfully so, he protected his energy. And he knew if he was there too much, it would just like affect his energy. He wouldn't have lunches with people. He wouldn't interact with people. That he believed that he just had to guard and that energy. And people said this was a thing that several people on the show told me, that when it was a show day and he showed up to the studio, and if you were around him, it'd be sparks flying. Those were his words, sparks flying off of him. They would tell me you could feel his energy. And like two people that worked on the show told me when they were guests on the show, one of them wrote a book and one of them did some music. During the show, when they shook his hand, one said it felt like a nuclear reactor, and the other said that you could feel the sparks. I mean, the energy that he would exude when he was hosting the show. He did this famous thing where they took his heart rate, I think some doctor, or his pulse or something, during when he was hosting the show versus before the show, or just like regular. And it was like his heart rate was just so much higher when he was doing the show.
Wow.
From somebody that performs or somebody that's teaching, what that was like. But he was exhausted. And a lot of people gave him, he'd make fun of it, but people would give him a hard time for only doing the show 3 times a week, the last couple of years. But the truth of the matter is, it wasn't laziness. He just did not have the energy anymore. And he would not let he didn't want the quality of the show to slip. I mean, he could have shown up those 5 nights a week, but he knew the energy he just did not have that. Within a minute, he could feel it.
And as a viewer, I don't think the 3 nights a week thing with the live shows on Monday and the one rerun was Tuesday, right? And then a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday live, if I'm remembering correctly.
It was something like that. It was somebody like Leno, the permanent guest host, or then Joan Rivers is the permanent guest host. Like, it gave him a break. It gave Leno and Rivers a chance to shine and get up their Las Vegas touring money. I mean, it was a win-win for, I think, everyone. And like, there was definitely expectations when Johnny did host. It was such a big deal for people. And I mean, but people made fun of him about it, and he acknowledged it. But I mean, I think he knew what his limitations were. And as he was getting older, he just, again, I mean, I think, without naming names, I think some shows sometimes stay around a little too long and the quality diminishes. And he just didn't want to be Bob Hope. He didn't want to be Jack Benny. He didn't want to be Lucille Ball, who he all believed stayed around too long, came back when they shouldn't have. And he just wanted the work to speak for itself. And he just didn't want the quality to dip. And I really feel as the timing was right. I mean, he was getting made fun of at Saturday Night Live, and he hated that, and he just didn't want to be perceived like he perceived some of the other entertainers that he loved. Hope, he personally loved Benny and Lucille Ball. He just didn't want to be remembered like that. So that's what he got at when he did.
I think he was smart in terms of legacy. I'm a big Hope fan because I'm familiar with the entire body of his work. And so many people, Bob just gets dragged for the work he did at 80 and 90 years old. People only remember that Bob Hope. We've talked in the past about why Carson didn't really enjoy Bob as a guest, because Bob would just come in and do his thing and not have a conversation. But I think there's something for off the stage. Go ahead.
Only near the end, like, I mean, I think he was fine up until like the early 80s with Hope. It's when Hope had trouble hearing, and Hope couldn't really, unless Johnny was reading off the cards with the questions in order, Hope was having a tough time even having a conversation. I think that's when it got, and that, I mean, it was just tough because Carson would be like, look, Bob, like, why are you doing this on Christmas going to Hawaii? And he'd be like, they really lay the money on you. And it's like, you don't need the money. Like, what? Like, Carson would be like, Bob Hope has no friends, or interests, no real friends and no interest outside show business. And Carson had so many. It was a curious guy and interest, and he just didn't really understand where Hope was coming from. But in terms of him personally, he liked Bob as a person, and he respected his early career. Huge Hope fan. There was never any personal dislike. Like, there's so many either like hack journalists or like YouTube AI videos like Carson hated. There was no hatred there. It was just near the end. He didn't really like having him on, but he had him on out of reverence because it was Bob Hope. But it wasn't a personal thing, and it was just near the end. But I hope it was, Carson wrote a handwritten letter to Hope, and it was, I think it was in '98, just with how much he meant to him. And, you know, Johnny retired from The Tonight Show and left The Tonight Show and was so careful about what he did. But when Hope said, will you do my 90th at NBC? Johnny said, yeah, of course. I mean, he made a rule that he wasn't going to come back and do anything, but he's like, for Bob Hope, I'm going to be there. I mean, so for people that ask me all the time, is it true that Johnny hated him? I'm like, not even close. That's not even. Yeah.
Well said. Appreciate you clearing that up. Did Johnny live for the show, or was it just something he was good at and, he didn't need to do it?
He lived for the show. If he told somebody privately near the end of his life, it was the only time he felt alive and felt happy and, really, really alive and happy. And it was just something he talked a little bit publicly, just in one interview, just about the adrenaline and just like to be in front of that many people when it goes well. I think Dave Letterman's probably in that category too. I mean, that it was just, even when sometimes it didn't go great, it just, Dave would always say it was the best hour of his day by far. And I feel like Johnny probably was like that too, but it became his identity. There were definitely, he had interest, but he was definitely very careful. Like, for example, like he tried golfing a few times and he found he was terrible at it. And he's like, I don't want to do this because I don't want to do anything that I'm not good at because I'm so good at The Tonight Show. I'll only like do things if I can be good at them. And there weren't a lot of things like he was manageable and stuff. Like he could be okay. But like if he couldn't be at least like decent or good, he wouldn't want to keep doing it. It was like his standards were really high, which is The Tonight Show. So that's I think why he turned down a lot of movies and acting roles, like lucrative stuff, like Steve McQueen and what movie was it? I read about it in the book, but he turned down like Lou Wasserman's offer. I think it was no. It was one of the other guys, the heads of it might have been Wasserman, or it was one of those moguls, Irving Lazar, actually, Swifty Lazar, $1 million check for like 10 days work. Back then, that was a lot of money. Now it's a lot. But I think some of it was just like he knew what he was good at, and he didn't think anybody would accept him for being an actor, a movie star, he would call sitcom like the kiss of death, especially back then. If you were on a sitcom, for a lot of times it was the end of your thing, that you were known as that, and it was over after that. It was hard to kind of build a career. So
Mark Makloff's book is Love, Johnny Carson. More to come. Let's talk about the Carson podcast.
Yeah, let's do it.
Why? Like you started that when there weren't a lot of podcasts before everybody, even I have a podcast now, but you were one of the podcasts I was listening to pretty early on. It was easier to discover such a thing. And I can't remember if you monetized it at all. You weren't like stuffing it with mid-rolls or anything. So why the Carson podcast?
Everything I've done, anything that's certainly been successful has been curiosity. Like, it was baffling to me that the guy who held the curtain open for Johnny, that no one had ever, to my knowledge, talked to him. Like, that's the way my mind thinks. Like, who is this guy? And Jeff Sotzing, when I sat down with him, was like, oh, it's this gentleman named Irving Davis. And I'm like, I want to talk to Irving. What was that like being backstage with the show? And he would tell me he'd be with Johnny. And like, a lot of performers just need silence and they're in their own. And it's like, no, Johnny would be smoking the cigarette, telling jokes and hanging out with me up until here's Johnny. He would just be like, and it was just interesting to kind of get that point of view. I just had so many questions what went on behind the scenes. My dad, even from the time I was still in elementary school, would be like, no, Mark, the reason that they're so funny together with the guests, a lot of it is because they determine what they're going to talk about before the show. And there's like, look at the credits, there's talent coordinators. And I was like, how do you get a job like that? Like, what? I just wanted to know how all the magic tricks were done. Like, it was this giant mystery, like how people got booked on the show, how they would get the like a farmer from someone like Frank Hill or someone from North Carolina who was the manure man. They called him, that made quail dropping necklaces and sell them. And it's like, where do they find these people? And like the writers, like, how did they get jobs there? What was it like writing? So it was just like, I had endless questions, and basically I got all my questions answered from asking people. I had no idea that there were people like other people like you. Thank God there were, that wanted to follow me on this 8-year journey doing almost 400 episodes. And it was just pure curiosity. And I got to ask how all the magic tricks, not magic tricks, but like what went on behind the scenes. And that's all I really wanted to know, is how everything went down and what Johnny was like off camera. And just it just like opened up this whole different world. And then that's what the book, which comes out on October 21st, 2 days before Johnny's 100th birthday, if you can believe it, was the same thing. I'd say the book is 40% of the podcast, and it's about 60% new stuff. That was what I got to talk to a lot of people like Jay Leno that wouldn't talk to me for my podcast as well. So I have a lot of new people I was able to add, but it was just pure curiosity. That's it.
I love, first of all, it's great because it's a nice piece of the legacy. I imagine some of the guests are no longer with us, and so this way the stories aren't lost to time. Much like Gilbert Gottfried's podcast, and we've even lost Gilbert, but he got some stories out of people before they were lost. I also like that sometimes you'll watch a documentary, and because of the nature of the business, you have to have famous people on it. So I don't know why I'm picking this person. I think I just read a story about him, but here's Rainn Wilson's opinion on Johnny Carson. And like you said, I'd much rather hear from the guy who was hanging out backstage on the curtain, or just super fans, than tangential celebrities in some of these things. So I think it's a fantastic body of work that I'm glad exists.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, the emails that I would get and the messages from people overwhelmingly were the staff, the talent coordinators, people like Irving Davis, people like Peter LaSalle, who was Johnny's producer, the writers. It was overwhelmingly Carson's assistants were the ones that I think people really, they moved people emotionally, and they were the ones that just to hear those stories, versus having the famous people, which is great too, the people that were guests on the show. Those were great to hear. And again, I can't believe the amount of people. I'm friends with Frank Santapadre, who was Gilbert's co-host, and the amount of people on both of our shows that are no longer with us. I think it's like 40 or 50 people that I had on the show that are gone. And it's really sad. Like so many younger people too, like Saget, Bob Saget, Louis Anderson. Gilbert was on my podcast. I had to bring him a sandwich. There were conditions when I went to his Chelsea apartment. He got on the phone with his wife's like, I think he'll do it if you get him a sandwich. And Gilbert got on the phone with me, and I had to get him a turkey sandwich with, I think, it was mayo and a drink and then a cookie, and it was like $6 a sandwich. And then he's like, "Where's the mustard?" I'm like, "Gilbert, you didn't say mustard." And then there's this big back and forth, but he still did the podcast. And then I showed him, he could not believe I had a surprise for him. I said, "Gilbert, did Johnny ever mention you on air to your knowledge?" He said, "No, I never was on the show. It was never mentioned." I was like, "Gilbert, this is your life." And then I played him a monologue joke that Johnny did about him when the Emmys, when he got into some controversy with a routine, and he couldn't believe it. He's like, "Can we watch it again?" I was like, "Yeah." So we played it a bunch of times, and he just was so baffled, like a little kid, that Carson mentioned him on the Tonight Show by name. It was really fun.
It's fascinating that Johnny Carson is still at least for late night, the North Star in the way that George Carlin is the North Star for comedians, both gone now 20 years. I stumbled across that fact that it's been 20 years since Johnny's gone. That kind of, I knew it and forgot it, and it stunned me the other day. But he really is just a North Star.
Yeah, the show's been off the air. I cannot believe this it's been 32 years. I mean, it doesn't feel like it. I remember when on May 22nd, 1992, where I was watching that final show. And it's amazing to think about that. I do think that one of the geniuses about Carson is, I feel like so many of the clips still play. It's interesting to me. Like, I sometimes will get emails from like people that are in college or people in their 20s that are discovering him on YouTube, and just, they think some of the clips are so funny. And just the fact that they still play, it's unbelievable to me. But just the fact that, I mean, constantly I'm trying to go online to see who's talking about Carson, and I'm shocked about the mainstream press that he still gets. Like, his son, unfortunately, Chris, passed away at 74, and then his third wife, Joanna, passed away a couple months ago. And just the amount of national news that he still makes, like. The Wall Street Journal just did a piece about his Malibu home. His last home is up for there's like 110 million or something somebody's trying to get for it. But the fact that Carson, all these years later, in the late night shows, Fallon, Colbert, and Kimmel, up until recently, for Kimmel, were still talking about Johnny and asking guests about Johnny. I mean, it speaks volumes, I think.
I think if you watch the old monologues, and the same is true of the young Bob Hope, there's the rhythm of the joke, so you could swap out the particular surname of the governor at that time or the president at that time, but the rhythm of comedy is there on those old monologues, and I think that's what's resonating with younger people.
Yeah, I mean, the monologue was Johnny's favorite thing. It was definitely this process where the thing that I miss about the monologue in the last 20 years or so is that Johnny's monologue, he either got laughs or silence. And in the last 20 years on the late night shows, they clap no matter what. I mean, if they had to sit on their hands and they couldn't do the clapping thing, I think that there would be some silences, and it would be interesting because the jokes never bomb. Everybody either claps or you'll hear laughter, but they clap. And just that Johnny, that there's, I wonder today, I'm sure that some of those hosts could ad-lib and be funny with, I just kind of miss, like, Johnny was like a high wire act. Doing that because he could cover with the bombing, and I think that was like part of the charm with him, is that he was so he would make fun of himself and just put himself in a situation like that where the other hosts now don't have to worry about that. But there was just something amazing. Like, I talk about this in the book a little bit. Like, there were sketches where the writers learned very quickly, you don't want to put a phone in a sketch, because Johnny, if it's not going well, can pick up the phone and be like, let's fire the writers. You don't want to put a lighter in the sketch because he could set fire to the script that's in front of him at the desk, cause if it's not funny and stuff. So, because sometimes like Doc would play taps if a sketch bombed, or if like the monologue joke, but there was definitely like humanity, and people loved him more for it. That's why he kept in all the mistakes for the most part. When Robert Goulet is up there in 1986, and forgets the words to memories from the show Cats, and he just turns to Johnny, he's like, no, you're going to keep going. We're going to get this, and keeps everything in. Same with John Davidson when he forgot the words to his song. He's like, no, you're going to get it right. The audience just loves the performer even more. It makes them human. And just, it was genius. Now they would just stop tape, but Johnny just was all about, let's keep all these imperfections in, and it was wonderful. I think that was really a charm, and I kind of missed that whole thing, just keeping all the mistakes in.
And refresh my memory, I think you just addressed this. When Joe Coy hosted the Golden Globes, he caught a lot of guff for throwing his writers under the bus, but I seem to remember Johnny joking about the writers when a joke didn't land, and it was charming. And I don't want to debate Joe Coy, but was that something Johnny would do, would reference the writers?
No, very rarely. I mean, I would talk to writers and I asked numerous ones, did you get in trouble if a joke bombed? They said, absolutely not. He never blamed any of us. He said, I picked the jokes. He took full responsibility. The thing that Carson said that I think Joy had a really tough time with hosting the Golden Globes is Carson would always say it's 80% acceptance. If the audience accepts you, you're getting up there. It is so much easier. They know who you are. And it took Johnny a little bit because he was this game show host. And audience to accept somebody as something different. And I don't think the Golden Globe audience certainly not in America, where he was not a household name by any means. So I think it's just a much harder time to do that. Whereas Ricky Gervais, they steps on stage and people get his sensibility right away and they know what to expect. Same with Carson. It is extremely hard for somebody that is not accepted, as Carson would say, to go up there. It's just the battle is it's just harder.
I think Nate Bargatze just suffered from that on the Emmys. A very likable guy, very popular comedian, but he's not L.A. Hollywood, and I think he struggled for the same reason.
I just think like certain people are built for certain shows. Like I think he was really great on Saturday Night Live, and I think it was probably a smart thing to play to the strengths to do that tape piece that I know that did well on SNL, the same premise. But yeah, I mean, there's just some people that were born to do that show. Like, I mean, a lot of people I've talked to will tell me they think Johnny, and these are people that didn't work on the show, told me that they thought he was the best Oscars host by far. I mean, he hosted, I think it was 4 or 5 times. And the fact that he was able to do it that many times, and he clashed with the director, Marty Pacetta, and it wasn't always easy, but he did very, very well. He wanted Johnny, like, if you notice in the monologue, he always, unless he made fun of Doc's outfit or whatever, he wanted always to remain on him, the camera. It never did audience cutaways. Whereas Marty Pacetta, when he directed the Oscars, wanted to do cutaways, and Johnny wanted to keep the lights down like he did in Burbank. And he always thought if a joke bombed, he could save it, but with his reaction on his face rather than if they did cutaways. But he felt like that was the way that he could make if jokes didn't do well, that if the camera just would stay on him. So they had all these different philosophies, and it was definitely a hard collaboration. But Johnny, I think his work as the Oscars, I think, as film historians, when they look back, and TV historians, I think he's definitely one of the best, if not the best, I think, that's done the Oscars. In the top 3, certainly. As
somebody who's had a media career of 35 almost years now, I always appreciate a professional host. There are some talk show hosts. I would put Johnny Carson in this category. The current generation of late night hosts. There are people you could wake up at 3 a.m. and be like, hey, we've got an emergency. I need you to host the Oscars right now, read the cue cards, and then throw it to break, and then I'll tell you what to do next. And there are people like that can do that. I'm a big Ryan Seacrest fan. I know people like to give Ryan the business, but there's something about being a professional traffic cop host that is underappreciated.
I mean, it's broadcaster and people that are good broadcasters make it look so easy. Like Dave Letterman recently mentioned the late Regis Philbin, and he always has to preface this. I've heard him say this before, that people think it's a joke about what a good broadcaster he was, but he was unbelievable that he could do that, the host chat without any script, and like just be interesting and just be likable and go on Dave's show, and they would do a pre-interview but never get to it, that he was able to do that. There are certain people that just have that skill set that could just get up, like you're saying, without much to little prep and be able to do well. I will say this, though, and I talk about this in the book, which comes out October 21st, Love Johnny Carson, is that Carson was the only, to my knowledge, was still the only person that would host those shows without any teleprompter or cue cards.
Oh, wow, really?
He would do the mnemonic device. He did something. I've heard 2 different versions. One was I know Harry Lorraine, who went on the show, who was a magician. Like, he went on a bunch of times, that he had a technique. And there was another person that had a technique as well that went on the show, memorizing. And I know Johnny took a class, speed reading class. He liked taking courses and classes. He took a class on mnemonics, so he would memorize. And his whole thing with memorizing is that if he could read the audience and felt like if you wanted to insert joke, the 4th joke he memorized, maybe he would put that 7, and he could edit in his head. Doc Severinsen told me he had never seen a performer that could edit as he was speaking. He could edit in his head. And think about what he was going to be, either if he was talking to a guest, like what he was going to ask next, or listen to the person, but then also be able to do both things and multitask as a host. And that skill set, I don't know how many people can do that, but Johnny was just brilliant at it.
Mark Makloff's book is Love Johnny Carson. More coming up. These days, you're hosting the Inside Late Night podcast. We're between seasons as I speak to you now. I'm going to deliberately date this on Monday because I'm going to start asking you some topical questions. And it's quite possible as we're sitting here in the studio that 9 news stories have broken. So in case we are dated, this is Monday, September 22nd, around lunchtime. So you're hosting the Inside Late Night podcast, which is between seasons right now. Where did that come from when the Carson podcast ended?
I do want to mention it comes back tomorrow with a new season. Unless something happens, we're all set to do a new season on September 23rd, Tuesdays on Late Nighter.
Well, that's hopefully today. As the audience hears this, I'm planning on dropping this on Tuesday unless my life goes sideways. So good
yes.
Timing.
The 23rd, yes. So today. Wasn't that a great podcast episode, everyone? So, yeah, it was one of those things where I loved talking to people about Carson, but at the time, I was running out of people because you had all these people that were, even when they were kids, like Neil Patrick Harris, Jason Bateman, Drew Barrymore. They're all now like in either their late 40s or early 50s. And it was just like the people that I wanted to talk to had either passed away or it was just I was running out of gas. So it was a little harder. So, I think I have a pretty good skill set with late night stuff, the things I know about or the things I'm curious about on some of the other shows. So I just wanted to kind of go broad and talk to people from Saturday Night Live and people that did Letterman and other variety shows and talk shows and just kind of pick their brains and ask the questions I've always wanted to ask. Like, I really love talking to Bert Sugarman, who is the creator of Midnight Special, but Bert Sugarman's Midnight Special. And Johnny Carson and him were neighbors and tennis buddies. And Bert was the one that told Johnny about his idea he wanted to do after his show on Fridays, and Johnny's like, absolutely, let's do this, and really supported Bert Sugarman's Midnight Special, which I think debuted in 73, and it was like revolutionary that there was another late night show. And that's how Tom Snyder, because they're like, oh wow, you mean we can do other stuff after Johnny's show and original programming. So just talking to a lot of people in late night has been really, really fun.
Well, let's go down the punch list. The big news story a few months ago. The Late Show coming to an end. Was The Late Show losing $40 million? Was this about something else? Where are you on the conspiracies?
I have no idea. I'm friends with people over there. I worked on the Comedy Central version of the Colbert Report for 3 years and 8 months. And I don't know. I don't know I don't know the economics. I know things have changed in the last whatever years, just with viewership of network television going down. I don't understand the metrics. There are way more people watching late night online, and it's amazing to look at the millions and millions of people on YouTube and other platforms, but I don't know. I have no idea. It never occurred to me that you could be number one and that this would be a possibility, but I do not know. But I'm glad they just won the Emmy. And I'm glad that they're going to at least get till May. But it stinks for people's jobs. It's a shame. It's like for any show like that to go under. I mean, there's a lot of great people over there.
I'm surprised they didn't look at things like, do you need 200 staffers? Can we do it with 180? Do we need 5 shows a week? Can we do 4? Can we do 3? Do we need the Ed Sullivan Theater? Like
that.
Go ahead.
Was me. I was very, because to my knowledge, talking to people over there, there weren't. I was thinking that they would cut the writers in half or try out different things. And to my knowledge, none of that stuff happened, to my knowledge. And I thought that there would be some foreshadowing. And to my knowledge, there wasn't. There, maybe I'm wrong. But that definitely to me was surprising that if that was the case, that there wouldn't have been some concessions made.
I'm also surprised that for any of these shows that we're going to talk about, no one has tried doing them live or close to live on a streamer. Like, I know it's called The Late Show or The Tonight Show, but I'd probably put more eyes on them if either of those shows were available to me at 8 Eastern. I go to bed. I'm old. And if something interesting happens the next day, I'm not going to go back and watch it on a DVR anymore because I'll see the clips on social. But if it were live-ish at 8 Eastern, I might stare at it.
Yeah, like John Mulaney, I think he did that for Netflix. I don't know how many episodes he did, 2 seasons. It certainly wasn't every night. I mean, he did it. Yeah, and I forget how many shows it was.
The second season was 12. The first season was several nights in a row because he was at the festival.
The numbers were just okay. I think like I read an article that said it was just okay, and they haven't committed to doing more. And I know that, and I admire Mulaney. he wanted to put on people he wanted to. Like, I love the fact he had Joan Baez on the show. And it was certainly, at least in one interview, he mentioned that some of the people, like, they wanted maybe some bigger people on here and there, and he wanted to do his own show. And I think it's great he did the show he wanted to. And I love the fact that he mentioned the set was modeled off of photos he saw of Johnny Carson's Malibu home.
Mm-hmm.
He had trees in the studio, which I thought was a really cool thing to Carson. But yeah, I don't know if but if they did the show live, if you did get somebody that was doing that every night, how that would work. It would certainly be an interesting experiment. There's certainly enough really funny hosts, I think, and comedians or personalities where you could try to make something like that happen.
Oh, I mean, even just the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon streaming on Peacock.
Oh, I see. Well, they did talk about, I did read an article, and I guess I could be off on this too, but I read an article saying that they were thinking about showing some of those shows on Peacock at like 8 o'clock or earlier.
Yeah.
Some of the affiliates balked, and the affiliates were like, no, absolutely not, because they thought it would kill their audience. And some of the networks, and I can see where they might be coming from, but I don't know. But so it definitely was a discussion. But yeah, if they did do those live on streaming, that would be interesting. I don't know where it's going to go.
I think we've reached the point where you can't worry about the affiliates, which brings us to this week's big news.
Yeah.
Jimmy Kimmel. You think he walks? You think he comes back? And again, we're recording on Monday. The story could have changed 7 times by the time you answer this and people hear it.
I'm just glad that his staff is getting paid. Staff and crew are getting paid. I have friends over there. I've been over there to visit numerous times. I didn't see that coming either. I mean, he's the first one that said, I don't know if these shows are going to be around in 10 years, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a challenge for the thing to come back, unfortunately. But I don't know. I feel like the best thing that happens sometimes to certain of these hosts, like Conan, is like the TBS show ended, and then he is so much more, not only like powerful, but like just so much more like just even beloved, just doing his podcast and doing the podcast and then doing his HBO show. I mean, I feel like there for a lot of those hosts, some of these guys can maybe find a different outlet that might be hopefully employ their staff, as many people as possible. But yeah, I don't know. I just didn't see this coming with him, and I just hope that people can still get paid for as long as they possibly can.
News cycles and the obvious aside, I've always felt that if one franchise survived, it would be The Tonight Show. I do feel like with late night, I don't feel like Seth Meyers is doing Letterman Show. I felt like Conan was doing Letterman Show, sort of, but in his own style. I can draw a through line all the way from Steve Allen to Jimmy Fallon. It feels like The Tonight Show, and I feel like at some point, if you're NBC, this is who we are, with the Today Show and some shows, and then The Tonight Show, and that's who we are. I struggle to see The Tonight Show going away, especially Fallon is sales-friendly, willing to play ball, not particularly edgy. I think that one will stick around.
He's on other NBC shows that he's hosting as well, which, I mean, if you've noticed, Kimmel, up until, recently he got yanked, but he was hosting Millionaire for ABC, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So I don't know if that's part of like the double duty stuff that is like now with some ratings and monetizing it. This is part of the deal that they have them hosting other shows, or how anything works. But I think that Fallon, in terms of like the people that watch it, the audience, he does a good job. I think he did a good job recently addressing the whole Kimmel, where he mentioned, I thought it was a funny joke saying that like his dad texted him like, I'm sorry you got fired, because people constantly are calling Kimmel Fallon and Fallon Kimmel. I thought he did a good job with that, and I hope he's around. I think he's done a good job. I really do. I really, though, like revisionist history, I know that he got a lot of bad press for this, but if I was the decision maker, I think that at the time I would have given it to Brian Williams. I think he would have succeeded wildly. There's so many news people that went into entertainment and vice versa that have done different things, but that just, he was number one, I think, at NBC News. And so to have somebody like make that switch, they yeah, it just the way it played out, especially publicly, it did him. It was not good for him. But I think if he would have been given that chance, I think he's so witty and so good at that, at doing that broadcast and so just the likability thing. I think his show. I think he would still be on the air if that's me. But I know that he never even came up but I know he has a skill set that he would have done, I think, very well.
And Jimmy Fallon just turned 51, Colbert's 61, Kimmel's 57, Johnny Carson retired at age 66. Now, that was a 4 cigarette packs a day 66 as opposed to a salad 66. So we might have been headed for a generational change in the near future anyway.
We'll see what happens. I mean, it's like Johnny was doing 2 packs of Pall Malls. I know that his friend Michael Landon, who passed away from pancreatic cancer, and they're saying that maybe the alcohol and cigarettes was something he was doing. Some people say up to 4 packs. It was just people were smoking and drinking back then. It was just such a different time. Yeah, like the younger people to be interested. I really hope with the late night shows never go away. Like I could see it being cyclical, where like nobody ever thought that primetime game shows would come back, and now, like, I mean, in the 80s or 90s, if you ever thought there would be primetime game shows like this, and they're all over the place now. So I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, that anybody can do things on YouTube and like with a phone, and I think that these things hopefully will always exist in some format. But I definitely, I don't know if you're going to see the big bands and anything or anymore to the extent, which is, I think, a big shame.
I do think they'll survive. Like you said, you may pull back the budget. Really, you just need a host and a desk and a chair and, basically what Mark Maron does, but film it. I do think there's something for 11:30. Some people have asked about, what else can Jimmy Kimmel do? And one thing that is true, I've been showbiz adjacent for a couple decades now. In Hollywood, they do keep score. Your Oscar is better than my Emmy, and we both know it, and we keep score that way. There is a big difference between I've got a late night show at 11:35 and I've got a podcast and make a lot of money.
I mean, the podcasters are all doing so well, and a lot of them, the people that are those comedians that are selling out arenas. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's different metrics. Definitely like younger people listen to like stuff like Theo Vaughn versus maybe watching the traditional late night shows. It's just things have changed.
Oh, sure. And money wise, Theo Vaughn's probably doing really well. But at the fancy Hollywood party, if we care about such things, Theo Vaughn is not Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, and things definitely in terms of like traditional media, which is just, I mean, things definitely in broadcast television and those type of, it's like people that are under 30, I can't believe, and I do get it just because it's so different. Like the YouTube people are the people that like we grew up with, that like, the mainstream people are like all on YouTube people we probably don't even know, that that's who they've gravitated to. And it's, it's just completely a different ball game.
Well, you talked earlier about how you knew who some of these celebrities were. We grew up in the monoculture where I kind of knew who Humphrey Bogart was because Bugs Bunny did an impression. I kind of knew who Cary Grant was because, Rich Little did an impression, or these people are on the Hollywood squares. I'll let you go in a second. I do want to talk to you about Jay Leno, who I've become obsessed with.
Let's talk Leno.
So Jay Leno recently said, you don't want to tick off half your audience, which according to Mark Makloff, author of the book Love Johnny Carson, is something Johnny Carson said, but Jay Leno was completely lionized. How dare he even weigh in on this? So what does Jay Leno know about late night? He's the worst person ever. No, my take, and I've been doing a bit on Jay Leno's the worst person ever, is he seems like a nice guy who's taking care of his wife who's suffering from dementia. We can get into the Conan of it all or not. Well debated, well discussed, but he seems like an okay person. But anyway, why did we lionize Jay Leno for saying don't lose half your audience?
I don't know. I mean, there were definitely, I think, people that some of those hosts that he was talking about, I think some of the hosts probably didn't appreciate in some of their audience. But I mean, Leno was asked his opinion. I mean, I don't know. I definitely think it's easy. He's an easy target to bash. I think people, I mean, he was still an amazing stand-up comic, and his Letterman appearances when he was with Dave on the NBC show were amazing.
Amazing.
He was number one for his entire run on the Tonight Show when he was host. He's a really, really nice guy. I've met him a couple times. I mean, I would not want to compete with him. There was definitely, like, when he was trying to get Dave's job, I go into, when him and Dave were competing Dave really wasn't. He was like, I think the best person should get the gig. What the steps Leno was doing to get the Tonight Show. And I talk about some of that stuff and some of the stuff that went on with Conan. I think those are probably the things that maybe people have brought up with things that they might have issues with him. But, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think Jay is just an amazing stand-up. And, I mean, his Tonight Show, I mean, you can't argue with being number one. I mean, I definitely think it is hard for him, from what I hear, just the fact that, like, every comedian, it seems like, in all that the TV historians, is just like they praise Dave and his Tonight Show and his innovation and just everything he has done for comedy, and Jay kind of gets a little bit forgotten on the Tonight Show, but it was just a different choice. Jay's goal was just to be number one, and he did that, but I definitely think it did come with a price, which is, I think people like kind of like looking back at the two of them and the shows and stuff, Dave's stuff just kind of stands out and is remembered more.
I think, like Jimmy Fallon, Jay Leno understood what the Tonight Show is and how you do it. As you said, his Letterman appearances, we saw a different, edgier-ish Jay Leno back in the 80s. He understood what the Tonight Show was. He executed the mission.
He was obsessed, like a lot of people, with, I don't know if Letterman was like this, but Jay was obsessed with the ratings. Every morning, look at the ratings, would call Rick Ludwin, vice president of NBC Late Night. How did you think the show was? He just needed, like Rick told me at least, the late Rick Ludwin, that Jay needed, like, I guess a superstitious athlete or whatever, just approval from him every single day. Until near the end, when Rick supported the whole, NBC decided that Conan was going to take the Tonight Show in 4 years, and Rick supported that. And Jay kind of, stopped talking to him for a bunch of time. And near the end of Rick's life, they did reunite, which it was good. That they did get back on speaking terms and friendly, but there were a bunch of years where they weren't. And Jay's just, I mean, I think he knew his audience as well as Johnny, in terms of getting the ratings and staying number one.
I do think it's insane he didn't mention the previous host of The Tonight Show in his first episode. That was his manager's call, as the story goes, but just unbelievable.
It seemed like it was from the people I've talked to, a very unhealthy relationship, and that she was just controlling, and that the dynamic was very complicated and unhealthy. And I talked to Jay a little bit. I talk about that in the book about Helen Kushnick. Jay has gone on record so many times saying that it was a mistake. And Helen wanted Johnny to acknowledge Jay or do something on Johnny's last show, and Johnny's like, "No, I'm not doing that." I mean, Johnny said and I talk about this in the book. He said, I never understood the whole Helen Kushnick thing. Basically, Johnny said, he's like, Jay never would have gotten the permanent guest host if it wasn't for Johnny. He said, if it wasn't for me, they would not have gotten it. And it's just like, I never understood like our show, like the 30 years, like how they treated us and how 30 years, like we didn't exist or anything. And, it wasn't, that Helen just didn't do Jay did him a disservice, and that's Johnny's opinion. I talk about that.
When NBC hit the panic button on Conan, if Jay says no, do they give Conan more rope? Do they call, I don't know, Gary Shandling? What was the plan C?
I don't know. I have no idea. I talked to Jay and I asked him, because I said that one of the reasons I think that they kept you is because if you would have left, they would have had to pay. One of the reasons they got rid of Conan is because they would have had to pay you, like, it was like $150 million. And Jay said that was absolutely not true, that they didn't have to pay him all that money. And that's the reports that came out. I don't know what they would have done with Conan leaving. The skill set is really tough. Maybe they would have moved Fallon up. I'm not sure, but Yeah, for the Tonight Show for 11:30, it's a tough time slot if somebody doesn't have their skills up to par. I mean, people forget like when Letterman was like the hottest thing in TV in August of 1993 when he premiered. He had done the show for 11 and a half years. Prior to that, he had guest hosted. He had a morning show and he had guest hosted for Carson all those times. So by the time he got his show in February of 82 at 12:30, he had already had so much practice. So the critics liked him and he knew what he was doing. The interview it still took him a little bit more time to figure those things out, even with that practice. But by the time you get to 11:30, if you don't know what you're doing, they're going to clobber you. And that's what happened to Colbert that first year when he was at CBS. I mean, people forget. But I just remember seeing on the message boards and comments on articles like Deadline Hollywood, like, I can't believe this is the worst mistake ever. And like, sure enough, I was like, just give him a year and see if he figures it out. And he did. And then he gets back. He's number one. I mean, it's just, you need time to figure out those shows. Leno too. I said to Jay on the phone when we spoke, because he was basically like, if Conan's show was better, I'm like, Jay, like, Jay, your show was not great the first year. You got all that time. You got to go to New York, to figure out like, oh, this works with this type of setup. Go back to Burbank and switch studios and have kind of like an 8H Saturday Night Live studio with the thrust stage of the audience up there. You had way more time. So I don't think Conan had enough time. I mean, Jay certainly was given more time to figure those things out. They're extremely hard. They look easy. There's people that watch them, the public that watch it and think I could do that. And I promise that is probably, it's the hardest thing to do. People say that's what people say.
I think history proved that if you were going to pull the plug on Conan, fair or not, that Jay was the right move. I struggle to imagine 36-year-old Jimmy Fallon in whatever it was, 2009, 2010.
Same age as Johnny when he took the Tonight Show.
But a different era. And
sure.
And Fallon would have been following a failed Tonight Show, and now we're going to throw another young buck in the chair.
Yeah, I don't know how that would have worked. It would have been interesting. They have different processes. The one thing I did that Johnny did, which I don't really understand to my knowledge, I don't think any of the three, Kimmel's not, unfortunately, got yanked, but to my knowledge, is that this in New York, the writers would do his monologue, but they would also like look at the pre-interview questions, the talent coordinators, and the talent coordinators and writers would write Johnny's ad libs. There were so many famous ad libs, and they would do that in Burbank only with the civilians, with like the farmer or like the potato chip lady. They would write, even though that was Johnny's idea for the potato chip lady to bite down on the chip when she wasn't looking. But they would always give him ad libs, and I don't know why they don't do that now with some of the hosts. But I don't think that's a thing. But I think it really, like New York, there's so many things with Johnny and Nixon where they're both like so witty and so likable in terms of some of their lines. And I'm like, it's all scripted down to the syllable. And I just think like Johnny didn't always go with those prepared ad libs, but sometimes he would. He really, people told me he didn't need them, but sometimes he would slip them in. I think it was just a good thing to have. I would really do think the host would benefit having those. I mean, he was a genius at making them look like he was making them off the top of the head. When he would do a segment in LA, if the writing was bad, he didn't like the writing that day, he would do something like blue cards where the audience would be in line and they would write down questions for Johnny. And then the writers would have 90 minutes to come up with ad libs for Johnny to type a secretary type on a card. And Johnny would read these real questions. And then you could not tell that they were prepared ad libs. I mean, it was just like, even Mike Reese, who was a writer, for Carson Simpson's producer, was telling me he was with his mom and they were watching the show and Mike's like, I just wrote that. And he's like, no, Johnny just came up with that. It couldn't make no sense that an ad lib like that would be prepared because it's so natural the way he was able to throw those things out. But, yeah. Amazing.
Joan Rivers had the same skill set on her radio show. She had two writers with her. They'd rip up pieces of paper, pass her a note, she'd deliver the line, nail it, and throw the thing behind her and would clean it up after the show. But she had it.
It's unbelievable how they made it look easy. I mean, Joan, when she had her late show on Fox, that was harder. Like the interviews, she definitely was not listening as much as she should have. A lot of people said in terms of like to her guest, and it was just a hard skill set. I mean, I think even though she had all that time when she was guest hosting for Johnny, it just to do it night after night versus every, a week, every like 5 weeks. It was just, she just couldn't do it. I mean, it's a shame. I mean, I definitely think maybe she would have succeeded. I mean, a little bit more because Barry Diller, after 10 months, I think it was 10 months, was like, we're getting rid of your husband as producer. And Joan thought he was bluffing and said no. And then Barry Diller promptly fired her from the position. But I definitely think if she would have stayed, maybe she would have figured it out a little bit more and they would have been able to take the ratings up. I mean, the ratings were not good when she left, when she was at the show near the end. But I don't know. I think Joan had good intentions. And I just think she, in terms of not telling Johnny, I go into that in the book, but I definitely think it was some of it had to do, a lot of it had to do, unfortunately, with her husband, Edgar Rosenberg. She kind of hurt like listening to him and his opinions and just kind of deferring to him. And I think it ultimately was not a good thing, I think.
It's also a brand mismatch. Fox, especially in those days, was edgy sitcoms and Simpsons. And then you're throwing on, Joan Rivers from Las Vegas, a little older than your demo. It visually looks kind of 80s cheesy. The set, I think, has not aged well. So I think there's a lot of that there. Whereas in the scenario where had Conan gone to Fox, that made more sense. Now, Conan may have been older than Joan Rivers was in these scenarios, but Conan just feels more Foxy than Joan Rivers did.
Yeah, I definitely think it would be more of a fit. I mean, it was tough with Joan because it's like she's doing these stunts, like giving out Victoria Principal's home number on air. And like Victoria Principal, like I sued her or did file the lawsuit. I don't know what happened with it. So it's like, why would an A-list person go on her show? Like, I mean, she had trouble getting guests. Is my point, is that she would do these things, and it's like she really thought like people like Barry Diller would use their personal connections to help get guests. But like, I mean, there were just so many complicated things that were mismatched with running that show. But definitely, the way that she was perceived with guests. I always defend her when she was guest hosting for Johnny. She always, in my opinion, with maybe one or two exceptions, made the guests look good. She did not do the jokes at people's expenses. Like I think people sometimes, they get this idea that she would make her guests uncomfortable, like Dave Letterman would sometimes. And she was very good at making her guests look good, with a few exceptions. Over on there, but I thought she overall she took Johnny's note about making her guests look good. I thought she did a good job when she was a guest host. Well, and that aspect.
Well, anybody still listening to us clearly enjoys your company as I do. The podcast Inside Late Night is back today. And do you have a book coming out? Can I pre-order it? How do I get this book?
Goodness.
What's it called?
I heard it's called Love Johnny Carson, and you can go to either Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target. There's Walmart. There's so many places. And people have been asking me, and this is really nice, that they want, if they want an autographed copy. There's a place called Astoria Bookshop that's in Astoria, Queens, New York City. So Astoria Bookshop is pre-ordering for signed copies. So yeah, please make me happy and pre-order. And there's definitely stuff in this book that it's primarily new stuff that people do not know. It's not on my podcast. And I did my best. It's 130,000 words, roughly, within, I think it's like 50 pages of citations, something like that. It could be off a little bit, but like I thought it was important to cite everything. And yeah, we have like stuff that like I was able to like use like Jim McCauley, who was the head comedy booker on the Tonight Show for stand-ups from 1977 till Johnny retired. He wrote an unpublished book, like a manuscript, and I was able to use some of it, which with permission. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff from like that I just blew my mind, that I had no idea. Just doing research, reading McCauley's unpublished manuscript and some other things. So all that stuff is there.
Were you able to get to Letterman?
Dave Letterman talked to me, even though I worked on his show for 11 months and 15 days. No, not at all. Dave will not talk to me. I've tried so many times. He, I think he does it when he feels like he'll talk to somebody about race car driving or something. I don't think he likes talking about his own comedy unless he has to, or about, maybe it's Johnny was such a special thing to him that I think he did it for the PBS documentary, talked about Johnny, but I I don't know if it would just be too hard for him just to talk about his the guy that meant so much to him. But no, I mean, I tried so many times back on the podcast and with this. I think he knows about it, but and it's what it is. I mean, I had a bunch of things in the book I tried to get him to verify, but I feel like my sources are good enough that they're in the book, and I just would have loved to have talked to him. Maybe he'll look at the book, but at the end of the day, Dave, from the people I talked to that knew him, some of them, he's just a shy guy, and he just doesn't feel comfortable around people he doesn't know. I'm sure it's gotten a lot better since he's left the show, but it's just what it is. I would not want somebody to feel uncomfortable interviewing them. I mean, I get it. Like, I've had like certain famous people that are just like, I am uncomfortable doing interviews. And I was like, okay, then we have nothing else to talk about. I appreciate you getting back to me. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. So that's all I can do is respect the no. Definitely there were people that took me 5 or 6 years, like Diane Camden or Angie Dickinson, where I just once in a while would be like, I'm still doing this. I would love for you to consider it. This is somebody I talked to recently. Here's the episode which you can listen to. And sometimes I am in the game of like, holding out and checking in, and you never know. And sometimes it takes a little longer. So love Dave to do Inside Late Night. So who knows? But so far it has not happened with him.
I'm going to stop asking you questions, or we're going to be here for 4 hours. Mark Makloff.
This is fun.
His book is Love Johnny Carson. His podcast is Inside Late Night. We should also plug latenighter.com. I'm on there daily, a great resource. Appreciate you. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, it's nice to talk to you again.